Everybody, welcome to the Blue Heart Podcast with me, your host, Lieutenant Joe. So we've had a little bit of a hiatus, as you've noticed, really just because of the coming of the summer and, setting up the pool and getting ready for the summertime and all that kind of stuff. So we are back. We should have regular podcasts and audio casts and everything for everybody going forward. We're going to concentrate a little more on training as we go forward. We're going to talk about some training, some leadership, and a couple of things. But first, I want to show you something really cool. My cousin, Chuck Ackerman, he was a Point Pleasant Borough, New Jersey police officer. He's retired. He makes signs. He makes these signs for, your college alma mater, your police agency, your business, all kinds of stuff. He also made the Blue Line skull for me for the show. He made the podcast banner. And recently, he just made this. This is awesome, right? This is the state of New Jersey cloaked in the Blue Line flag. I think it's absolutely awesome. I want to thank Chuck. I'm going to find a place to put it up here in the studio. But Chuck makes all kinds of these signs. He's really an amazing guy. And have him come on and we're going to have a program talking about, jobs that you can do and being retired and all that kind of stuff. But I wanted to show you that. That's really cool. Another thing I wanted to thank, I'm trying to say this correctly. The Lower Saucon Township Police Department in Pennsylvania. I did some training there, and the chief gave me one of their challenge coins. It's really cool. I do collect the challenge coins. So I was really Lower Saucon Township, really a beautiful place in Pennsylvania. Very, very nice, but I want to thank them. All right, so today, this is a little bit of our Tales from the Road segment. Now, we talked about starting this, and I think it's about time we start doing a couple programs on it. So for everyone out there who's listening on the audio podcast and here on the YouTube channel, the whole idea of Tales from the Road is to describe some real cases or some real events that took place and talk about it so that we, see if there's any lessons learned that we can pull out of each and every one of these. So the very first one we're going to do here is one called One Bad Check. You say to yourself, one bad check, what the hell's that got to do with me? Well, we all know that check fraud, and like every other kind of fraud that's out there, is a big problem for lots of people. People creating checks that don't exist, stealing money from people, scamming elderly people with these fake checks and all that. But this was a really interesting case. And it was solved not just by my detective work. It was solved because a patrol officer in Eatontown, New Jersey, noticed something suspicious about a person and made a quick note that he put on the back of a traffic ticket, which was really the key to breaking this whole thing open. So the point being is that for a case like this, a check, one bad check that led to fraud in over $1 million worth of fraud, where we seized a house, we seized bank accounts, we seized jewelry, and we seized a Corvette as part of the investigation, and we saved untold number of victims, all kinds of money that they were being scammed out of. So I'm going to tell you that story, one bad check, and how this patrolman did the right thing in a very, very simple moment of issuing a traffic ticket, something that didn't seem right, and he asked a few more questions was the key to this entire case. So we had a check cashing store in our town. People could go in and, they cash checks. Now, this is often used by people who don't have bank accounts for whatever reason, and they need to cash a check, either from an employer, or somebody gives them a check, whatever it is, and they run down to the check cashing store. The check cashing place takes a percentage of whatever the check is for and then cashes it for the person. So I get a call, or police station gets a call. The guy who runs the check cashing store says he wants to report a fraud. He got scammed. I said, okay. So the patrol officer takes the report, and then the report gets turned in. It gets assigned to me, and I read it. And basically what the man was saying is that a guy, and we'll call him John Jones. John Jones was coming in every week for the past 2 years, and he was cashing dozens and dozens and dozens of 20, 40, $50 checks, uh, dozens every week of these 20, 30, 40, $50 checks. Lots and lots of money, but all the checks cleared. The guy got his fee. Everything was good, no problem. Until John Jones showed up here and he presented a check for $30,000 that was purported to be from the New York Insurance, or I think it's New York Insurance Agency. And the guy trusted this fella. He's been in thousands of times, cashed thousands of checks. And he said, "This is a big check." He goes, "Yeah, it's from an insurance company. I got it, and I'm cashing it here." And he said, okay. He was not really sure about it, but he cashed the check. He went and got the cash for the guy, gave him the money. Guy drove away. Well, of course, the check did not clear. It was a fake check. And the owner of the business, the check cashing business, reached out to John Jones at the phone numbers he gave him. Got no answer. Couldn't get the guy. And after a couple of weeks, and he hadn't come, he wasn't bringing more checks anymore. He just took off after he got this 30,000. And man made the police report. So I gather all the information I can. He had a photograph of the guy. When the guy comes in, he had a camera taking pictures. So he had a picture of the guy. He said that he drove a Corvette, but he didn't know the guy's license plate number. But he had his home address and he had a phone number for him. So I began my investigation. So, of course, I start looking up the person, right? You try and figure out who is this guy, John Jones. Well, I couldn't find anything on John Jones. No, nothing. As I researched this guy. I researched his house that he said he lived. I think he said he lived in Lincroft. There was no such address listed when I went there and looked. There was no place. So I was kind of at a dead end. And then I heard from somebody, I think the patrolman in my town, who took the original report. He goes, "You know what? I'm hearing that Asbury Park had their check cashing store got hit by the same guy." Okay, well, that was good, right? That gives me at least something more to look at. Well, I go over to the Asbury Park police station and I talk to the detectives there. And they said, yeah, basically they had a case. Guy was doing the same thing, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of checks for the past couple of years, small amounts. And then he came in with a $25,000 check from an insurance company. He got the money and he disappeared and they can't find him. So they basically closed the case. So I said, "Can I see your file?" And they gave me the file. Now in my town, the guy was calling himself John Jones and I had the photograph. Then I looked at the Asbury Park case and he was calling himself Mike Jones and they had a picture. It was the same guy, clearly the same guy using a different name. So now I went back and I started researching Mike Jones and nothing. No, I found a driver's license in the name of Mike Jones that had the fake address in Lincroft. So I knew I had a guy and he had a driver's license, but it was all fake information. Now, how does that happen? You can go through DMV. You can have an inside person give you a license. I did a case on that a couple of times. But the reality was he did have a driver's license. So he was driving around. He did have a car we knew of, and I knew what he looked like. So, of course, I passed the picture around. Does anybody know this guy? Local police departments, and nobody did. So we knew that he did at least a $45,000 scam, $55,000 scam on the two places, and he was in the wind. So I figured he had to be local. He was coming every single week. He had to be local, right, somewhere. But the fact that nobody knew him, no officers recognized him, he had no tickets, nothing. The address was fake. The name I figured was fake too. I thought it was kind of a dead end. So what I did is I put the case off to the side because I had exhausted everything I could at that point. And every week I would run the driver's license. Every week I would, pull the file out and run this guy's driver's license. And there was nothing for about 3 months. All of a sudden, one day, I run his license and I see that he got a red light ticket in Eatontown, New Jersey. I said, holy moly. I call the court and the court says, Officer Ruiz wrote the ticket, and the guy came right in the next day and he paid the ticket. I said, okay. What do you have for an address and this and that and the other thing? And she gave me the Lincroft address and the driver's license that we had. And I said, man, do you have parking lot cameras? Do you have anything? And we didn't. So I was frustrated again, but at least I knew he had a ticket. And then she goes, do you want me to pull the ticket? I said, yeah, can you pull the ticket? Maybe there's something else that could help me. I don't know, something. So she pulls the ticket and she's looking at it and she goes, yeah, interesting. On the back of the ticket, the patrolman hand wrote an address in Jackson, New Jersey. And I said, that's interesting. Hold that ticket. I'll be right there. So I went over to the police department and Officer Ruiz was working and I asked him to come in and I showed him the ticket and he goes, oh, yeah, yeah. I showed him the picture. He goes, yeah, that's the guy. I said, why did you put this address on the back of the ticket? He says, just something about this address I didn't like, Lincroft, and it just didn't. I said, where are you hanging your hat? As a matter of fact, I said, if I go to Lincroft right now and call the PD, they're going to say that that's where you're sleeping. And he gave some excuse that, no, 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 I moved out of there and I just haven't changed it on my license. Oh, okay. Where are you hanging your hat tonight when you go to bed? And he gave the address in Jackson, New Jersey. So I couldn't have thanked this patrol officer enough. That feeling he had that something was not right, he asked a few more questions. And when he did, he got more answers and more information. And that's the key to this story for all of us. Whether you're a patrolman or a detective, keep asking questions. If you're not satisfied, if it doesn't feel right, keep asking questions. And this officer did, and it was great. So I took a copy of the ticket, and then I drove to the address in Jackson, New Jersey. Now it was about, I guess, 20 miles, 25 miles away from where my agency was. And I drove, and as I'm getting to the address, it's a brand new development. Now, at the time, Jackson Township, which is physically a huge township in New Jersey, they are building developments everywhere. So there's new housing developments all over the place. And I get to this brand new development, and I'm driving down the street in an undercover car. I didn't take a detective car. And I'm driving down the street and I'm looking at the house numbers and looking at the house. And then all of a sudden I see, oh, there's the house. And there's a black Corvette sitting in the driveway. And sitting on the porch is my subject. And he's sitting there smoking a cigar and his kid's playing on the front lawn, little kid. And he's sitting there. And I drove by and I said, Corvette, there's my guy. He's at this house in Jackson, New Jersey. So from that, I went to the Jackson Police Department, and I met with the detective there, and I said, hey, could you look up this house? Who owns this house? And they look it up, and there was a third name registered as the owner. So now I had the information on, now maybe this was his real name, and I ran that, couldn't find anything on that name either. But obviously it's registered, with the county. He has a mortgage on the house, the whole 9 yards. I reached out to the mortgage company. Sent them a subpoena and they sent me the information. Down payment, he's got a mortgage. The house at the time, when the average house was selling for about $250,000, his house was $550,000. It was this magnificent, beautiful new home that he had purchased. The mortgage company said he put down $300,000 and he mortgaged $250 or whatever. It was a huge amount of cash he put down. We got his bank account information, all that kind of stuff. So I gathered up all this information and we did a search warrant. We had a search warrant prepared to go to the house and search it and look for records of these checks. What's up with these checks? The investigation led me to some real people involved with him. So all these checks, I reached out to the people with the checks. So I found Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, who had sent him like 20 or 30, $40 checks. And I reached out to them. I found them. I have made a whole list of all these checks that were cashed and who these people were. And it turns out the common denominator for all of them was that they had had medical expenses through a company called Health South, which is a physical therapy kind of a company. If you're injured, you go there and they make you better, right? They were not involved in the crime in any way, other than all of these people were in default to Health South, and their accounts were sent to a collection agency, right? So all these people that didn't pay their bill to Health South got sent to collection. So I found the name of the collection agency, and I reached out, and there was Mrs. Myers was listed as one of the um, account handlers. And I call her and she says, no, my ex-husband started his own collection agency and we took $2 million worth of defaulted accounts and we gave them to him to collect on. And his deal was he got 30% of whatever he collected because they're bad debts, right? People didn't pay their bills. So he went after them and, hey, he wrote a letter. I'm now collecting. What can you afford to pay? People would say, I could send you $20, $30, $40 until they pay off their $10,000 or whatever their bill was. And there were hundreds and hundreds of victims. Well, when I talked to this ex-wife further, she said, yeah, he ran the business for about 6 months. And then he quit. He said he didn't want to do it no more. He's going to do something different. I don't know what he's up to. He married our babysitter. Can you imagine that? The guy threw the wife out and married the babysitter. So she gave me more information. So now we knew that this guy had $2 million worth of bad debts. He was collecting and giving Health South the money, and then they were paying him 30%. And what he decided to do was, hey, since these people are all sending the money, I will not work for Health South anymore. I will start my own company. They will send me the checks, and I will tell them it's putting it towards their bill that they owe Health South, and I'll just keep the money. That's why he went to check cashing stores. So there was no record of all of these checks into a bank account. So when I finally put this all together, I realized that the guy had received $800,000 from all of these victims, people who couldn't afford to pay their bill, but were doing the best they could, sending him $20, $30, and $40 checks every month. He was cashing them, keeping the money. Health South didn't know he was doing this, so they just wrote these people off as bad debts. The people didn't know their money was not being applied to their account, and this guy was just keeping all this cash, and he used all fake names and everything to do it. So long story short, we get this search warrant, and we have cars, marked cars from Jackson Township. We have their detectives. We have 3 or 4 marked cars from my town and my detective team. And I had we had an undercover van, right? It looked like a minivan. So I said, let me drive past the house real quick and see if I see him, if he's out there or whatever. And I drive by, and there he is again, sitting on the same porch, the same kid playing in the front yard that I saw the first time. He's got a big old cigar in his mouth. And I look at him, he looks at me, and I kind of wave, hey, how are you? Like I'm a neighbor driving through. I go around the block, and there's the team ready. I said, okay, let's go. Let's roll up on him right now. So we, here comes this caravan, and I'm leading the way, and I can see him, and he looks up and he sees all of these cop cars. And there I am leading the pack. I pull into his driveway. Cop cars pull in behind me, and literally the cigar in his mouth just dropped when he saw all these cop cars. So I got out and I went over. Hi, I'm Detective Joe. I have a search warrant for your house, et cetera, et cetera. And, I need ID. I need to know who you are, your real name. I kind of explained the investigation to him. And he was perplexed. He couldn't believe that we found him. And out of the door comes his wife, the babysitter. Now, at the time, he was 56, 57. She was like 24, 25, beautiful young woman. And she comes out of the house. She goes, what's going on? What's going on? He goes, listen, it was just me. It was just me. She had nothing to do with any of this. And he starts, confessing. So we read him his rights. And I said, I'm here about the checks. He goes, yeah, it was just me. I did all the checks. So we placed him under arrest, put him in a police car. And he goes, listen, you don't need to talk to her. I'll tell you everything. I said, okay, that's great. We had the police car then take him to Jackson's police headquarters. And we went over and met the wife. And she was very, very nice. She was naive. She invited us into the house. We advised her what we were investigating. And she says, no, that's a legitimate business that he has. You must be mistaken. So we advised her of her rights, told her that, because she lived in the house and she was aware of the business, that she could potentially, have some culpability in this case. And she said she understood. She waived her rights, of course. Then she made us coffee and tea while we sat at her kitchen table. And she basically gave up the whole story, thinking that it was legitimate. No, he has a business. Randy has a business, and people pay him, and then he sends the money, and all the nonsense that he had told everybody else. Only he was keeping the money. And we asked, where do you think he got the money for that? Well, the business is very good, she said. The business is very good. So at that point, she took us to the basement and we found dozens and dozens and dozens of boxes with personal information, records, and everything of all of these victims that he was using to collect. He had a whole table laid out in his basement where he had old collections, new collections, and ones he was going to start calling. And that's what she did. She would call, "Hi, I'm representing, Randy's collection agency. We want to make a deal so you could pay your debt." So she was part of it, but she honestly believed it was legitimate. And you say, "Oh, of course she did." In the course of the investigation, I was convinced that she really did think it was legitimate. Like I said, she was naive, and this was her husband, and she believed him, and that's where they got their money from. So at that point, and this is the funny part of the story, I said, "The Corvette's sitting out front." She goes, "Oh, isn't that a beautiful car? I love the Corvette." I said, "We're confiscating it because we take it for forfeiture because he used that to facilitate the business." And she was very upset, but she gave us the keys. We loaded a rack body truck filled with boxes of all these victims' information, bank accounts. He had bank accounts all over the place, his mortgage papers, everything we had on his real identity, who he was, and this, that, and the other thing. And this young lady is standing there and she's very upset. And she said, "What should I do?" I said, "Well, you're probably going to want to get an attorney for him. He'll be booked and then he'll have bail probably or whatever. And you can get him out and you just can do what you're going to do." And she had this big giant diamond ring on her finger. I said, "That's a beautiful diamond ring." She goes, "Oh, isn't that beautiful? Randy bought it for me because I do such a good job in the business. He wanted to give me something nice." I said, "Oh, that's fantastic. Can I have the ring, please?" And we took the ring off her finger because it was purchased with the stolen money because he had no other job. This is the only job he had, was to swindle and cheat these people out of their money. And she was also wearing a gold ankle bracelet. And I remember the patrolman from Jackson standing there when I took the ring off her. He started laughing. He couldn't believe it. I said, "Did Randy buy you that too?" And she goes, "Yes, he did. All the jewelry upstairs he bought me too." "When did he buy it?" "Oh, within the last year or so." Went back and confiscated all the jewelry. Everything they had was illegitimate because this guy was using stolen money for everything. He ended up pleading guilty. We ended up taking his house for forfeiture because the mortgage money was fake. He was making the mortgage payment with stolen money. So we confiscated the house. Eventually, it was sold back, I think, to the mortgage company. We didn't keep it. We're going to do it a house. It was sold back to the mortgage company, some kind of a deal, but all went into our law enforcement trust fund. He ended up pleading guilty. I think he got 5 years in prison he stole quite a lot of money. His wife testified, and that was the end of that. But it all started from one bad check, right? So when you go on these calls and you go and you do something that seems so minor, you never know where it's going to lead. And the whole case was broken open by a patrol officer on a car stop who didn't like the information he was getting, and he asked more questions. And that was the break I needed to investigate and place people under arrest and bring them to justice and try and help all those victims. We did get a lot of cash out of his bank accounts, and I believe it was returned to as many of the victims as we could identify. We sent them, tons and tons of cash that we had from his bank accounts, however the court determined it would to be. So it turned out to be a really good case. Economic crime is amazing because you never know what else is involved in economic crime. You got drugs, you got gambling, you got all kinds of things involved. So don't snicker at any kind of a case, because in this case, one bad check led to an amazing investigation and a tremendous seizure of stolen property and assets. Be that patrolman. Ask questions. Think about things. Be the detective that follows it up and does the right thing. All right. So that's our first episode here of Tales from the Road. One bad check. I want to remember our sponsors, Blue 360 Media, publisher. They publish my books. They publish everything law enforcement. And also medicalessentialdiagnostics.com. They are a company in New Jersey, excuse me, that helps anyone who works for a government entity, state, federal, local, in New Jersey. You can go there and get a full medical screening for you and 2 adults in your family for whatever insurance you have. And if any of the tests are not covered by insurance, Medical Essential Diagnostics covers it. They got 6 offices in New Jersey. They will help keep you alive. Find out now if there's anything wrong, so you can beat up the pension for as long as you can. All right, medicalessentialdiagnostics.com and Blue 360 Media are our sponsors. I want to thank you all for being there. And remember, do a good job each and every day. It is an amazing career and a thing we get to do. This is Lieutenant Joe saying, hey, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.